right, video number 3. So the parent molecule we eat is a triglyceride. And within the triglyceride, there are fatty chains, fatty acids, legs, if you will. They're typically different. They're not always the same. The only food I can think of where the legs would be almost identical, like the same, like either saturated or unsaturated, would be coconut oil. And I'll show you that in a second. It stands out. Typically they're very different. And here's a good example of what a fat might look like in, let's say, canola oil, which is a common cooking oil. This is a triglyceride that I drew. I've tried drawing this like more modernly, using more modern methods, and I failed, so I'm not going to talk about that. This is the glycerol. I just call that the knuckle, if you will. Here are the fatty legs. The one in the middle is no double bond. It's saturated. It stacks really well. This one is bent mono, and this is a polyunsaturated. The way we identify these fatty acids is where the double bonds land. This, again, doesn't have to be you don't have to be a chemist. You just have to be able to count Legos or pearl necklaces. So if this was a piece of jewelry and it was hanging on somebody's dress or a suit or whatever, and the top was like made of silver and had 3 little pearl necklaces hanging down, some sort of 1925 Art Deco piece, if you counted up from the bottom pearl, 1, 2, 3, and that's where your kid had glued the pearl necklace or the brooch or whatever, that's where the double bond is. That's an omega-3 fat. That's it. All the people in life telling you to eat omega-3s, eat salmon, eat tuna, we're just asking you to eat triglycerides that have fatty chains, and some of those chains have double bonds, and the double bond is on the 3rd carbon. It doesn't have to be on the 3rd carbon. You can skip it. You can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the first double bond shows up on the 6th carbon. That's omega-6. I just added this little graphic just for doing this video. If we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's omega-6. You don't even have to have a double bond there. You can have a double bond at the 9th carbon. It's getting rarer now, but that's actually that's not rare. Omega-9 is basically what you see in olive oil. It is an omega-9 monounsaturated. Typically for the human diet, we do eat omega-3s, 3rd carbon bent, omega-6s, 6th carbon bent, and omega-9s. There might be some other ones, but they're extremely rare. That's the bulk of the human diet. Now, here's the tricky part. If you have triglycerides that are just made of saturated fats, 1, 2, 3, that is completely unessential for us. We don't need that. We can make that in the liver from scratch. The things we can't do are placing the double bonds in some location. And again, we're going to need fats that are unsaturated in the body, and we need ones that are saturated for different purposes and different reasons. But the two places we can't put a double bond, human biology, human chemistry, is we can't put a double bond on the 3rd carbon, and we can't put a double bond on the 6th carbon. So when we go to eat food, and we're eating triglycerides that have little carbon chains, we need to eat unsaturated ones that have double bonds on the 3rd carbon, omega-3 fats, or double bonds on the 6th carbon, omega-6 fats. We don't need the omega-9. Maybe we could make it. I don't know. I actually don't know. But we have to eat the omega-3s and the omega-6s. And so when you look at your food supply and you know that every fat you eat, corn oil, soybean oil, if you eat pork, beef, chicken, deer, ostrich, whatever, all those animals have fat, right? Different kinds of fat. And then inside the fat is triglycerides. They're going to have different kinds of fatty chains. And we're going to look at those little fatty chains in the triglycerides and ask the question, are there any omega-3s and omega-6s? Because those are considered essential. We have to eat them. And the reason why we have to eat them is kind of simple. We build stuff with them. So, and you don't need to know the details of this really. But when we eat omega-3 fats from, let's say, salmon, or omega-6 fat, which I'll explain in a second, from, let's say, corn oil, we then can make other fats from them. DHA, EPA, and arachidonic acid. You don't need to know these specific names. But these become hormones, baby hormones, cellular information molecules, and you're not going to make these hormones unless you have the parents. So the reason why we have to eat these omega-3 and omega-6 is because we make stuff with them which is essential to run the human body. So these are essential fats. Saturated solid fat is not, which finally gets us to this slide, which is the greatest slide in the history of slides in nutrition. This is your entire food supply. Not everything. There's no acai berry here. There's no there's no almond here. There's no avocado. But this just gives you a rough cut of the fats that are out there. So if you look at the triglycerides, right? There's 3 fatty acids inside. Let's say palm oil, very popular. Well, a lot of those fatty acids that are dangling down are going to be saturated. Some are going to be monounsaturated, and some will be omega-6. Could you eat palm oil as a source of an omega-6? Absolutely. Of course you can. Is there any omega-3s in palm oil? No, there are not. You could not go to the moon. I'm sorry. You could not go to Mars eating palm oil alone. We have to eat omega-3 and omega-6 fats. Chicken fat. Wow, chicken fat doesn't have a lot of saturated fatty acids. No wonder why it's so soft. Chicken fat has a lot of omega-9. Look at that's the same as, wow, canola oil and chicken fat. Well, maybe no, they're not the same, but they're pretty close, right? Peanut oil, canola oil, and chicken fat basically have like the same amount of monounsaturated fat, the stuff we find in olive oil. If you look at coconut oil, all those parents, triglycerides, they're mostly 3 chains that look the same. Saturated, long dangling chain of carbons, straight, flexible. Long dangling chain of carbons, straight, flexible. Long dangling chain of carbons, straight, flexible. That's why coconut oil is so darn solid. It stacks really well. They're not crooked. They're all straight. This is just lumber at Home Depot and Lowe's. But when you get down to the oils, like safflower oil. Safflower oil is, you look at the triglycerides, and those of the 3 fats coming down, the vast majority have 2 double bonds, and here we go, are crooked. Of course, this is not going to be a solid. In fact, of the oily fats we eat, this is the most liquidy. It's the most pourable. It almost pours like water. When you get to olive oil, it's oozy, it's thick, because it's unsaturated, but there's only one little bend. So it doesn't want to be a solid, but it's not against it. Safflower is opposed to being a solid. And so you wonder why these are kind of oozy and thick, because they have a lot of, I'm sorry, these are watery and not thick. They have a lot of molecules that have 2 double bonds of fatty acids, and they just don't want to stack. The ones in the middle, the olive, the canola, and the peanut oil, these are a little thicker. They are oils. They do have fatty acids which are bent, but they're not super bent. Okay, that's that. Now, you have to eat omega-3 and omega-6. When you take a critical eye to the foods you eat, ask the question, where the heck is the omega-3? Because it's not in butter, really. It's a little bit. Beef, a little bit. Lard, pork, a little bit. Olive oil, a little bit. Canola oil, check mark. I can buy that. I can use it. There's one. Safflower, there's one. No, there's not one. That's a little bit. Sunflower, none. Corn oil, virtually none. Soybean oil, I could buy that. I could use it. Check mark. You could use walnut oil, or you could eat walnuts. That's probably the better way to go. Flaxseed oil has a ton of omega-3, and then fatty fish does. So we've got fish, flax, walnut, soybean, canola, and then I would put a comma there, chia seed, hemp, and a couple others. Avocado does not have omega-3. Almonds do not have omega-3. The problem with the omega-3s is there's not a lot of them. Foods that have omega